But I want to share a tip with you all about fixing a mistake. After you've pieced your block, here is another friendship block. This was my tester sample, so it's a little bit brighter. I use different oranges. But after you have pieced your block, let's say you had mistakenly flipped one of your blocks around, or you're working on piecing your quarter square triangles and you accidentally swap two and your colors are on the wrong sides. I am going to leave it completely up to you if you want to fix it or not. I'm the type that it would drive my mind crazy if it were swapped and the wrong colors were in the wrong place. But that is just me and for myself. Now another person might make the same mistake I would, and if it doesn't bother them, it doesn't bother me in the least, and I'm going to be the last person to tell them that they should fix it. Now if you feel like you should fix it, and you have glue basted your entire block and sewn it, just simply use a seam ripper. So I really love this little one because the blade here is really small, and it goes into a smaller stitch size like I like to use when I piece. I mentioned in the first video, but sometimes it bears repeating, is I usually sew with about a 1.8 to a 2 stitch stitch length. So that's my preference, and this seam ripper works really well for that. So if you've glue basted it, there is no need at all to get the glue wet or try and wash out the glue before you take out a seam. So let's say this was upside down, or I was just unhappy with the way something looked or something was flipped around. So just like you would normally go to unpick or unsew, whatever you call it, you would just go in and take out some stitches, however you like to do your seam ripping. And what I like actually about the glue basting is this keeps it really stable as I am doing seam ripping. So it works really nicely to keep things in their place. So let's say I get to the point where I'm going to take it apart, and on the back side I'm just going to pull that thread up and rip it through. See how I did that? And then what this little plastic end does is it gets those little fuzzies right out of there, just rubs them out like an eraser. If there's any there, it rubs them right out. And then while it's glue basted, see, it didn't fall apart. So then maybe you actually realize that, oh no, it is right and I just unpicked it. Well, it's still glue basted, so you can just go back and sew it. But all you need to do is peel it apart. Easy peasy. No need to get it wet and to soak out the glue at all. Any glue in here will wash out when you wash the block completely. So I hope that helps when and if mistakes are made. We all make mistakes. Believe me, I certainly do. And you know, that's part of the experience as well, is making mistakes and figuring out how to fix them or asking for help. So I'm always here for you. We're all here for each other on our Facebook group as well. And just remember that when you do make a mistake, if you want to fix it, go for it. But you know, sometimes it can be one of those artistic expressions or a little, you know, you can call it an intentional design element. Our quarter square triangles and square and a square are ready for the next step. So we're going to start with the square and a square, and I already sewed everything just as I had the first time. So we're going to set the seam here and just press out toward the corners. And it's probably very clear that this block is bigger than it needs to be, which is just fine. We kind of want it that way because it's easier to trim and have it be the size we want than try and make this super duper accurate. Now I did include a foundation piecing or paper piecing template for the square and a square if you prefer to use that. I also have a great technique that I like to use called paperless paper piecing. I have an old blog post on doing a square and a square, and if you are a paperless paper piecer, feel free to use the template, the same template, that I use for foundation piecing for paperless paper piecing. You just reverse the numbers. If you're a paperless paper piecer, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. So this is ready to trim. And you know, I don't like how these corners are flipping up. They're kind of bugging me. So I'm going to give it a little starch, not much. Remember, you don't need much. And just give it a little press and make it do what I want it to do. The other corner decides it wants to flip up too. Now, it's not going to matter in the grand scheme of things because it's going to be pieced into the block. But it just makes me feel a little better when it's a little bit more manageable. So this will be trimmed next. First, we're going to go ahead and press each of the quarter square triangle blocks. So set that seam, and just like with that Ohio star, we're going to open up that middle so you get that spinning seam, and then just push it on down right in the middle. Give it another, boss it around again. And then press your seams to the sides so that they twirl around just like a pinwheel. And if you feel like you need to give it a little starch so that they lay flatter, feel free. And then now these are going to be ready to trim next too. And if you have any glue in that intersection, just kind of pull it apart. It comes apart really easily. If it doesn't come apart easily, I'll venture to guess that you might have been slightly heavy-handed with the glue, and you could lighten up a little bit and do a tad less next time. Because really a little bit goes a long way with the glue basting. Now these quarter square triangles are going to trim up to 4.5 inches, just like our snowball corners did. Our square and a square will also trim up to 4.5 inches. Again, that is the unfinished size, meaning that is the size with the seam allowances included in the measurement. When it says finished, that means that they mean that it has been sewn into the block. So the seam allowances are not a part of that measurement. It can be confusing, but just keep in mind sometimes it's better to make it a little bigger and have to trim it than to end up having it too small. All right, so these are ready to trim. To trim them, I just need my rotary cutter and my ruler, and we are going to start with the square and a square. This square and a square is meant to be 4.5 inches. So what I would like to point out is the alignment marks to align your ruler at when you are truing this up. So if you can look here, this is a 1/4 inch mark, this dotted line here, dashed line, and I want the dashed line to line up intersecting with that little corner right here, and I want that corner to also be at the 2.25 inch mark because 2.25 is half of 4.5. Now over on the other corner, I want the same thing. So that dashed line and 2.25 intersecting right there at that corner at the top. I want the same thing down here and over here on the side. My ruler has this nice white line that goes right through at the 2.25 mark, so that helps me visually to see that it's going through both of those points. So then I can just make some micro adjustments to make sure that it is aligned up here and here. And then once they are aligned, then you can just trim the 2 corners, and then you'll have a trued up corner to work with. Now you'll see I did give you the extra to work with. It just gives you that flexibility in case you do mess up or you're sewing or something happens. So it's just that wiggle room that helps a lot. So flip that around, put that trued up corner at the 4.5 inch mark, and just to help you, know that everything is where it belongs, go ahead and just visually line up those other marks, and then you will be all set. Okay, so this is all set, and now I'm going to true up these quarter square triangle blocks in the same way we did that Ohio star. So if you remember, we aligned that 45-degree angle right along that seam. Now those blocks were a little bit smaller. So these are going to be 4.5 inches. And again, what I love about this ruler I'm using is 4.5 inches by 12.5 inches. But my 45-degree angle cuts right through from the point up here at the 1 all the way down to the 4.5. So I can get my alignment really nice. And with that mark at the 2 1/4, I get an intersection right where the center of my block should be. So that works really well. And then I can trim off the two sides. Mostly it'll be the corners, but sometimes it'll be a little bit more. If you're finding that your blocks are too small, that these quarter square triangles aren't working out to be 4.5 inches, then, and you're using this method with the Fons and Porter ruler, then you need to shorten your seam allowance when you are joining these. If they are turning out to be too small, your seam allowance is too big. So shorten it down to more than a scant, or because it's always better to have it a little bit bigger and have to trim than have it be too small. Okay, so we've got that ready, and I'll get through these last ones, and then we'll be ready to put our block together. Now, you probably noticed that for the most part, I'm just cutting off the dog ears. There are a little bits that are being cut off that are a little harder to see on the camera because I can't get that close. But they do make a difference. So definitely get those dog ears cut off, and then anything extra. Oops, I didn't rotate it all the way around. And did a quarter instead of a half turn on that. That's all right. It's just an extra step. Okay, so all 4 are ready. Everything's ready to piece together. And now let's go ahead and set out our block and see how everything looks. So we'll get that all set and ready to go too. I think you're going to love it. I think it's going to be really wonderful. Go. Gotta get it in the camera. There we go. Let's see it pretty good there. Okay. Alright, and I'm just going to square those right here. And then our snowball corners. Now, because they are done with 2 different colors, there is a number 4, which is going to be your lighter one, and the number 3, which is the darker. The number 3 is going to go up in the upper right, and the number 4 is going to go in the upper left. If you swap them, it's not that big of a deal. It's really not. You would just then rotate your block around, and everything will match up just fine. But what is important is that we have the number 3s across from each other here, and the number 4s across from each other here. It just helps. It's just part of the color design that I made to go along with this block, to play with the color value and see how different colors interact with each other. It's a lot of fun to see those values work together. So this is how our block is going to be. See, these little darn things are curling up and driving me crazy. All right, so this is what our block is going to look like. It gets pieced together in a traditional 9 patch. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We're going to sew together one row, sew together the middle, sew together this row. We'll piece the seams for each, and then we'll put the 3 rows together, just like we did for the Ohio Star in month 1, along with Limelight. We're going to go ahead and prep those rows and get them ready to sew, and we'll have this block piece in no time. Well, to get our rows pieced together, let's go ahead and stack the rows, stack the blocks of each row together that are going to get pieced together. We're going to set those aside so we can get those glue or pin basted, whatever your preference is, and those go there. right, and when we are going to baste these together, I prefer and highly, highly recommend that you lay out your blocks exactly how they are laid in the final block. This will prevent this happening and this happening. It's going to happen to somebody, I'm quite sure of it, but if we can prevent it and ease any frustration at all, then let's go ahead and place these just like they're going to be placed when they're pieced into your block. And then we are going to go ahead and place glue right along the inside of that seam allowance. Take your next block, flip it over, right sides together, matching your trued up corners, and then heat set that seam, and then fold this over just a touch, about 2/3 to 3/4 of the way. And then place glue right on that seam allowance. Now this is where it's going to be tricky. You may just want to do this, flip it over and do that. Try and just stay aware. To all you have to do is turn it right sides together, and then match those corners, match the raw edges, top, bottom, and side. Heat set that, and then to double check that you didn't accidentally flip it over, open it up and lay it out just like that, and you can see that everything is in its proper placement. Now these two seams are ready to sew, and I'm going to prepare the other 2 rows in exactly the same way. So we'll lay out our middle row. Draw a line of glue on the inside of that seam allowance. Take our square and a square, right sides together. Match all those corners. Heat set that. And then flip this over to join these 2 together. And then that row will be ready to sew. And then that row is ready. We'll double check the placement, and they are all ready as well. So the final row, which is exactly like that first one, again, align these so that everything is where they belong and not accidentally turned out. Draw that line of glue. Go ahead and align your blocks. And heat set that. Right, heat set that. And align, check for alignment by opening them up. They look great, ready to sew. I am going to go ahead and sew each of these seams at that 1/4 inch mark, stopping and starting at the 1/4 inch mark, so I can get those seams to spin in the intersections just like this is. So these are the intersections that matter most. Well, they are really the only intersections. Now, if you don't want to stop and start at the edges of the snowball blocks, you don't have to. You can just start at the tip and sew down to that 1/4 inch mark. Back stitch up here if you'd like to. Just make sure to stop here at that 1/4 inch. And if you wanted to, you could sew from the side of the the 1/4 square triangle, because that seam is going to intersect just like on the flying geese and the 1/4 square triangles from the Ohio Star. It's going to give you kind of an automatic stopping point where that 45-degree seam is at. You'll be able to stop right there. So we'll go ahead and get those sewn. I'm going to sew them and then come back to you with them sewn. If you feel like you need to watch me sew them again, Go ahead and hop back to one of the previous videos, the Limelight or the Ohio Star, and you can watch me sew those seams, which are just like these. And then we'll go on to piecing the entire block together to create your very own Friends Forever block. Each of the rows are all sewn and ready to press and be joined into the complete block. Let me point out real quick that the seams for this middle row do need to stop and start at the 1/4 inch on each end so that the intersecting seams can spin. So do make sure you do that if you are going to go ahead and spin those seams. So let's press out each of the rows. I'm going to set the seam for each seam. And then these seams are going to alternate in the pressing direction, just like we did for the Ohio Star block. So it doesn't matter too much which is which, as long as they alternate. So I'm just going to start with this one going out and this one going out. If it goes in for you, that's just fine. There's no right or wrong here. On the pattern, I will indicate, you know, right, left, but as long as they alternate, it really doesn't matter which way you start. So that one's ready. So the middle one, because these went out, the middle two seams, the middle needs to be pressed in. If I were to press these out as well, these would not nest and spin. So let's set those two, and these are going to press in. Now, when you press these in, whether it's at this point or when you join the rows and these press in the opposite direction going in, this part right here, this little added bulk might be a little thicker and heavier for you. So just do your very best to get it nice and flat and accurate. If you need to press from both sides, you can, because sometimes it'll like to poke up. But don't worry about it too much. Just expect that you're going to have a little extra bulk there because you have multiple layers coming together. Now, because it's bulky, if you were to keep rubbing your iron on it, you might find that that gets shiny. So the way to prevent any shininess is just to hold your iron there and not rub on it. Another way to do it, if you do want to rub, is to get a pressing sheet, like a Teflon non-stick sheet, or one of the Bone Ash pressing sheets, which I also have in my shop, but they're really nice to use too. Or a really thin rag can also help. Okay, so those were pressed in. The first row was pressed out, so these will be pressed out as well. So now you can see that these are all ready to be joined. I'm going to join these two rows, and then once these two rows are joined, we'll add on that last row and the block will be complete. Let's set that aside and we'll go ahead and get this prepared. I'm going to glue base these two together, and when I sew this, these two rows together, I am going to start and stop one end to the other, like the camera there, from one end all the way to the other, no stopping. If you prefer, you can backstitch at the ends of each row. Okay, so let's go ahead and get these glue basted and ready to sew. I'm going to glue baste on the inside of the seam allowance like I have with everything else. And then once they're glue basted, I will sew that scant 1/4 inch, and I'm going to just sew from end to end. You do not need to stop and start at any intersections. If you prefer, you can backstitch at each end, but that's completely up to you. So we'll go ahead and glue baste these two together, just that light line of glue. And then start from center out. Remember that little tip from before, center out to match these seams. So from center out, match these seams first, and then go out to match your corners. It's better to have these match than have these match, because these seam allowances will just go be absorbed into your sashings. So we'll go ahead and heat set this, and it's ready to sew. Now, if you want to, and you certainly can, you can glue baste on that third row and have both rows ready to sew at once. It is completely up to you if you want to give that little trick a try, and go ahead and sew both of those rows, and then we will press this and the block will be finished. Right, these first 2 rows are sewn. Go ahead and set your seam. Now we are going to go ahead and open up the seam here so that we get that beautiful spinning seam intersection. And we'll do that for the other side as well. Just get that opened up, release any glue that might be in there, and then take your iron from the back side and push down inside of that intersection. Just helps to kind of make it go where you want it to go. And then flip it on over to the front. And from the front, we're going to press these in the alternating directions again. And what I'm doing, I'm kind of feeling with my hands which direction they're supposed to go, and I'm kind of coaxing it. And then flip it around as you need to for your handedness. All right. See how that looks from the back. Make sure you didn't twist any seam. Sometimes a seam might do that kind of a thing. So just take your iron and press it back the way that it goes. And now these 2 rows are ready to be joined to make our complete block. So we'll glue baste that just like the other and sew it, and we'll get it all finished up. Okay. From center out, match your seam allowances down to the corners. And you can feel with your fingers when they kind of lay right into that groove. Get into their little groove. And this one is ready to sew. And last but not least, our final seam is sewn. Let's set that seam, prevent any of those ripples, and go ahead and open up those intersections one final time. And get that iron, push down those intersections a bit. Flip it on over and press those final couple of seams in the directions they're supposed to go. And then your block is done. Oh, I hope you love it. I hope it turned out just as you had envisioned. Please share your blocks on our Facebook group, on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter. Use the hashtag Stellar Stars BOM. Also the hashtag Friends Forever Block. If you just put Friends Forever, you know you're going to end up with your block in just a slew of pictures of friends taking selfies and all that fun, silly stuff, which is fine too. But so Stellar Stars Block of the Month, Stellar Stars BOM, and Friends Forever Block. Thank you so much for joining me again. For month 2 has been a lot of fun to put together. Month 3 is going to be fantastic. It is a really fun block with colors that range from a yellow to a yellow orange. It looks like a fire blossom bloom, and you could take a peek at it in your pattern. And I will have some sneak peeks up on Facebook. So I will see you all in month 3 with the Stellar Stars Block of the Month. Thank you again for being a part of this with me. I just am having a great time. I hope you are too. Please let me know if you have any questions, concerns, or need anything that I can help with. And happy sewing and have such a wonderful time. Thanks again.